Everybody, this is George here. We are back. We had a technical issue, but we're going to be joining back real quick. We're going to be sending out a mass email with the new link because we broke the internet. That's the issue there. And by broke the internet, we ended it. Stream hit the button too long. And so we're going to be live stream. If you could give us 5 minutes, we'll make sure we be back and better than ever with the new link. So you check your email. We'll also put it in the old chat as well.
We're going to put this link to this stream right now because where it's going to go. So I just got to get it reset.
So be reset. We're joined back with Ben and the session that we had. So give us a few minutes as we're getting back there. I know the audience is joining now, so we'll keep it going. And they're joining and joining.
You good?
Yep. We're going to bring Jason, come on back over. Jason, Caitlin, one of y'all want to come up? We're going to chat. Come on back in. So we're going to go live here with just a spontaneous session with Jason and I as we get back to getting the link out to everybody. As I mentioned, everybody, the link ended too soon. We clicked on the button and so we're getting it launched back up and hoping that we'll be able to get everybody back into that. So if you hold tight, Ben's going to be sending out another link and I'll be sharing it as well here in the chat of our old link as well. So if you can help us spread the news. But until then, Jason, as we have people rejoining us, back. Sometimes joy leaves. It was a moment of panic, frustration. So we're just going to extend our conversation here, Jason, with some of the things that you're doing to bring joy back in. We can talk about joy in the workplace and what it means for overall, but let's break it down because for me, when I think about leadership and the impact leadership makes, we can talk about leadership all day long. But for me, I believe the sum of our life is not how well we lead others, but how well we lead ourselves.
You're so correct.
And so talk a little bit about not just us as leaders with titles bringing joy to the workplace. Talk about the self-leadership of guiding yourself through that, because we can talk about impacting others, showing grace to others, trusting others, leading others. But those are the same things that we have to do for ourselves. How do you lead yourself to joy, to choose joy?
You know, author and speaker Vitaly Harden says, be where your feet are. And to me, that's a powerful statement, being where your feet are about joy in yourself. First off, you got to love yourself. You got to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And believing in yourself means that you can believe in others, that you can trust others, that you can give to others, but you first have to kind of cultivate that in yourself.
Yeah.
And you do that through, daily practice. It's a choice. It's literally, like I said earlier, you put the shirt on and it's a daily choice every single day to get up and choose that mindset.
Right.
You can choose a lot of mindset, man. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world. You can listen to a lot of stuff, but you kind of have to tune that out and you have to tune into yourself and what moves you forward every single day.
Yeah. And so for those out there yesterday, we had Jeff speaking and he was talking about being proactive versus reactive. And so here we are with his fire extinguisher analogy is that, we're putting out fires and we find ourselves in a little bit of a fiery situation. We find ourselves in a little bit of things that could take our joy, right? With what we're doing, technology, and we're doing these events. We haven't had this issue since year one, where everything went down. You remember that?
I remember that. Yeah.
So we've been here before.
We thought it was COVID.
Attacking the system. And so we're back up. with this. And so, how do you you put out fires? How do you root out? Because you're going to have negative Nancy, sorry Nancy's that are out there. I'm using all these names that my dad used to say, and I'm looking around to make sure there's no Nancy's in the audience. How do you get rid of the negativity, negative Bobs and negative Georges that can really impact the culture, or impact joy? What do you do when a person on the team is just so negative and it's trying to steal your joy and take it away?
I think one, you have to demonstrate confidence and joy in yourself. I think you have to model it.
Yeah.
I think you have to model the behavior that you expect. But I think personally, you have to do it with grace. You have to learn how to put out those fires with grace, because sometimes it's a fire. It's woo, and sometimes HR, we get in that, we're the fire police, we're the compliance popo, we're all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And many times when we do all that, our hair's on fire, we're running around. But sometimes you have to settle back and you have to be able to do it with grace. And remember, there is a person on the other side of that conversation that you're talking to every single time, every single moment. Am I perfect every time? No, I'm not. I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, no, I'm not. But as you walk through those situations, when you respond to those fires and you're putting out those fires, I was just talking to my friend Caitlin Sampson, and she's talking about having those difficult conversations after her speech yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. And what that does to us as HR professionals, we carry the weight of our organizations many times. We carry the weight of others. And then we have to remember who takes care of us.
Yeah.
Who tends to us. And so I believe that if we do that through grace, remembering it's person to person and every situation is different, I believe it makes the workforce a whole lot better environment to work in.
Yeah. When we create that environment, one of the things I love is I always say you got to inspect what you expect.
Absolutely.
You have to be able to look into what are you desiring as an outcome for your company, your culture. And so back to the self-leadership aspect, we talked about joy and those things. How do we continue to invest in ourselves and not just inspect and expect for others in the organization, but really now let's talk about evaluating ourselves. What are some things that you do from a personal? I'll share some of mine as well. But what do you do to kind of evaluate where you are, who you are, and then also where you want to be?
I think a great checks and balances is your colleagues. I mean, when you get to work with incredible people, your network, your HR network, your outside of HR network, man, when you get to bounce ideas off of one another, iron sharpens iron.
Mm-hmm.
And you evaluate yourself based off your colleagues. They can help shape you. You can have mentors. There's a lot of professional development you can do. This is an incredible platform itself. But personally, I challenge myself. I hold myself to a very high standard. Sometimes that may be an unrealistic standard, but I hold myself to that standard. And every single day, it's kind of evaluate at the end of the day.
Yeah.
How did the day go?
Yeah.
How did I handle that? Did I handle that right? And it's a little tweak. It's not a negative on yourself. It's just a little tweak. Man.
Yeah. And so for those who are joining right now, I know that we started off with me and Jason. You're thinking, I'm back in the beginning again. We're actually live right now. So you're not getting the rerun of earlier. This is live as we have Principal Ben on the back end, getting things prepared for us to be set up for our continuation. So this is live. You are live with us today. If you're hearing this right now, this is just, you get a Jason and George 2.0.
2.0.
This is extra credit here for y'all.
Did I get
that are
promoted?
here today? You know what?
Hey.
You have been accepted to your bachelor's PhD. So you're moving up to the PhD status on that end. And so we're ready and back in there. Jason, thank you so much for filling in. Do we have one more song?
I don't know what we got.
Well, you said I'm working 9 to 5.
What a way to make a living. CHR Summer School.
Oh man, thank you so much, Jason.
Goodness gracious. Everybody loved that one. All right, so I need just like 10 seconds to get. Apologies to everybody. And my fervor was like, we haven't done this since 2020. That's crazy. We broke the internet back then. Maybe did that again. Who knows? So I'm going to get Ken Matos queued back up again. And again, apologies for this. We'll make it make all the things connect back together after we're all done here. But we're going to continue on the agenda. Everybody can pick it up. The emails have gone out to anybody else. If you know anybody, it's like, hey, how do I get back on? feel free to post and say, hey, here's the new link. Here's where I'm watching it. Let everybody else know out there so that they can come back and join you.
Yep.
Okay. You got something to share really quickly?
I'm just going to show somebody keep on asking the shoes. So I'm just going to show shoe number 1 off today. These are just some Nike. Most of my shoes are Nikes, but this is what we have here. I like the little print there in design. So Nike Air Maxes is what I'm rocking today. And obviously, yes, I did change the shirt because I expected there to be a fire, ladies and gentlemen, and I wanted to have some joy next to me for Ben to see that we are proactive and not reactive, and we have backup plans. We have a plan. We usually don't have a plan B. We're going to make plan A happen. But today, sometimes to be proactive, you got to have a plan B.
You're a plan only A or half of A. If there's is there half a plan A? That's what George is usually.
I'm all in on half. I'm like a lowercase A.
I'm lowercase plan A. All right, so we're going to get back with Ken Matos. I'm going to restart that one so we can stitch this together afterwards in case anyone got lost in the translation. We'll make sure those are connected together, and we'll dive back in with Dr. Ken, hear about data. I guess maybe I want to hear data 1 or 2 more times. We'll pick back up from there. So again, apologies everybody for the wackiness. We're going to get right back to it. Emily, I know you've been enjoying the conversation so far, and this one here I've been honestly really looking forward to. I'm excited because every time Ken and I get together, there's some mad science that happens. Ken, we know it, right? There's some sparks flying. There's always something creative that comes out of this. And for the audience out there, I want you to listen in today because Ken's going to use some ideas from some of the research that he and the team at HiBob have done to give you some ideas on where you may be, maybe some opportunities, we'll say, to be more data-driven, to think about how to use the resources you have to impact your people in a more positive way, to impact the company in a more positive way. And Ken's always got the smarts to do that and share those things with us. So welcome. So glad to have you here.
Hey, Ben, thank you for having me. Always happy to get a chance to talk to you.
I know. I'm like, look, man, we're having so much fun here and we're getting some good things out for the audience. I can't wait for them to hear from you. And at the end of this, I know they're going to be like, golly, that was incredible. I know, because I'm building you up. Can you tell them, like, building you up?
Setting me up. Setting me up, maybe?
Maybe, who knows? Who knows? So before we get to some of the good stuff I've already teased for the audience, would you take a minute and tell them more about who you are and what you do, please?
Absolutely. So I'm Ken Matos. I'm the Director of Market Insights at HiBob. So my background is as an organizational psychologist. I've spent the last 2 decades working in government, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations focused on what makes work for people, whether it be flexibility, a more inclusive environment, higher engagement, or simply better data management.
I'm going to go off the script already. If you had to boil that down, like you've looked at this across all these different organizations and industries and contexts, is there like one thing that makes work, or is it too varied because people are varied?
I would say actually making a decision. In so many organizations, the biggest challenge is trying to hedge your bets and do everything kind of halfway so you can tilt too quickly. And then you end up not having anything baked enough to really deliver value. And so being able to say, our hiring strategy is about retaining people because knowledge and relationships matter, great. Or they don't matter. And, somebody can do great work for 2 years and leave, and that's okay too. And just picking the approach sets you up for success. Trying to be everything to everyone is the one thing I see over and over again creates challenge.
It feels like too, if you're not committed to a direction, you never know if you've arrived or not too. You're like one foot in, 1 foot out of the boat. You're like, we may be winning or not. I haven't fallen in yet, but you're not really getting anywhere.
And as you change the leadership, you change the colleagues, the argument can shift overnight. And you can't have nothing to go back to and say, well, we agreed that this is what success was. I delivered that. If you want to change it, great. I'll do the new thing. But let's start with the assumption that everything I've done was working.
Okay. All right. So detour for me there for my own personal joy, but I was just trying to understand that one. Again, every time I get a chance to chat with someone who has that IO background, I'm just like digging in the weeds of what's possible, what's there. We have another amazing IO psychologist by training who's here speaking at the event, Nicole Eisdorfer from Vail Resort. So all of you are, Ken and Nicole, you'll get that big ideas from. Here it comes. So Ken, you and the team at HiBob, and again, we appreciate HiBob for supporting the event, by the way. Meant to call it at the beginning, but they've been a supporter for years here at Summer School. We appreciate them. So you and the team recently finished some research around HR priorities, surveying people just like those listening into us today. What were some of the things that you found that were intriguing, some of the things you found to be true?
Yeah, so we went and talked to over 200 HR leaders to understand what was really valuable in terms of the programs they put out, as well as the kinds of impacts they were getting. And so when we went through that list, we were asking them about leadership, DEI, onboarding, engagement, and well-being initiatives. And so just a couple of things that really popped were like above everything else, onboarding was your number one investment. When you had really good onboarding, people were saying things were made a lot better by their onboarding programs. About over 40% said that it made things a lot better. Closer to 80% said it just made things better, which outstripped pretty much every other type of investment that we asked people about. It helped with engagement, it helped with alignment for the organization. When you really set people up to join, you also end up having conversations about who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, which goes back to my first point in this conversation of what is the decision? Because that new person's going to ask you all those questions. What's the right way? How do I make a decision under these circumstances? And it really reveals to you where your gaps are. And so across all the different things we asked, onboarding really established itself as being valuable both as a diagnostic and an intervention to make the organization more effective. So I've become a really big onboarding evangelist because it has so many opportunities to solve both the immediate problem and stretch out into other ones.
You use two words there, diagnostic and intervention. So a diagnostic as in it will tell us like what's happening, right? What's going on there, I guess. We can use it as a measurement for, are we hitting the right key points in that to set them up for success? Is that how you envision that diagnostic piece?
For example, if your company does onboarding surveys, those are going to usually be identified. So a specific person will tell you how their onboarding is going. And so you can see, does that match our expectations? Are they missing out on some essential experience? You're able to compare that across time, doing trends and see like, suddenly our onboarding experience is not what it used to be. Is that because we lost a key person? Is that because there's change happening in our organization? But because it's an identified survey, you can then just go talk to that person and say, oh, you said you weren't getting X. Let's just give it to you. And then we can go back and systemically make sure that that doesn't happen again. Whereas a lot of other initiatives are either to learn what's happening or to change a thing, but they're often not connected so that you get a virtuous cycle. Onboarding, if you're doing any sort of onboarding survey and data collection, you end up with both.
Thinking about that, so maybe an action item for the audience listening here is, number one, you said, if you're doing surveys for onboarding, I would imagine there's still plenty of us that weren't. Okay. So I did informal stuff when I was running HR team, but I did not do an actual formal survey. And this isn't a 50 question, assessment. This is, a couple of questions on, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we improve, like those sorts of things probably. But you're saying like keep tabs on that over time. If you see a dip, step in. If you see it increase, like also what happened, what improved there. The only thing I'd throw in there is we often think of onboarding as all the processes and pieces of information we put around someone, but it's also the people we put around them, the connections, the relationships. And if they're feeling kind of disconnected, maybe we missed a chance to introduce them to someone that has a point of connection that they would find valuable. So some encouragement on that for anyone listening in. Anything else you throw in there around the measurement or how to make sure they're using that data well?
Absolutely. So I think two things. One, really take a moment to think about whether or not the things you're measuring in the onboarding survey drive something else that you care about, whether it be retention, performance. For example, you might want to say, what's the 1 year retention of people post onboarding? What's the performance at their first performance review? Do you find any sort of relationships changing over time? I really think that one of the key things is to not just, hey, I did a good onboarding and they liked it, but do people who have better onboarding experiences actually end up having better contributions to the organization? And then second, really thinking about those questions and making sure that they are not just, hey, did this thing happen? But like, did you meet the right people? So you may do an onboarding for, hey, did you have your meetings? Later on ask, have you been able to use those meetings effectively? Have you gone back to those people for advice? And if you find that like, oh, they're never talking to those people again, maybe you introduced them to the wrong people.
I think that it takes me back. There's a company out there, and I'm forgetting their name right now, where they have like a 3-month onboarding process where for that first few months, they're a massive company. So probably outside the scope of a lot of people here, but for that first like 2 months on the job, you don't do anything. You just meet people and learn about things and soak it all in. We don't have that kind of time for most of us. It's like, how quickly can I get Ken up and running? Because there's some work to do. And it's like, throw them in there, but also make sure they're prepared. And for all of you, you're hearing this theme through the whole event this week, where it's how to be more proactive and less reactive. And this is a good example where, yes, there's some work to do some of this stuff, Ken, as you're saying. But if I see it happen right there in the moment, I'm like, hey, like for some reason over the last month, our survey feedback went down, or our satisfaction went down with onboarding. I want to step in now before people start leaving 3 months into the job because they feel disconnected. I want to step in now when it's this big versus when it's that big later on. So this is a big part of that theme of being more proactive. Okay, so some good things there on onboarding. Anything else that you found in the survey that you were like, oh, this really intrigued me, or something you'd love to share?
Yeah, so one of the things that really popped for me was how few of our respondents said that they were tracking key outcome metrics. So about 51% said they used turnover to try to justify their different activities, and that was the most commonly cited thing. Only about 48% did engagement. Productivity drops to about 35%, and well-being 33%. And so very quickly after turnover and engagement, all the other potential ways of showing what's happening, they're not doing. And I was like, how do you keep your seat at the table if you can't show why you're there? And ultimately, it is to manage these things and to show how the way you set up people for success drive success for the collective that is the business. And so that was like a really shocking moment.
You and I have talked about this before, and one of the things that we found similar to that in our study is that when HR teams, like all of you listening right now, when you tell us, I'm not really great at telling stories with our data, when that is the case, you're more likely to say turnover is the answer to every question. It's like, hey, we're having an issue here, turnover. And we're having an issue over there, turnover. Like we just go to that as our immediate reaction, our gut reaction. And those teams that are better at telling stories have this diverse set of things, some of those metrics you just shared, things like productivity, engagement, and others that they lean on as ways to tell that story and connect with what the leadership cares about. And so for those of you that maybe are not measuring many of those things, as Ken said, like the data are showing there that we're not as often as should be, that could help you is if you start thinking about what story can I tell with this data point that's going to connect that thing that leader cares about. Because when you weave those things together, suddenly it matters more to them. And they may not use the phrase, Ken, engagement. They might not use the phrase productivity. Maybe they would, but they may be talking about our competitiveness. They may be talking about our stability as a business or our innovation, like those sorts of things like that are what they're saying. And it's up to us to have our little, you need your Ken Matos Rosetta Stone in your pocket that you can go, oh, they mean engagement or they mean this, but I'll talk about it in terms that they care about.
I really love an example study that I saw. I use it as a reference point because it's so easy to understand, where retail chains looked at engagement of their people in the stores and how quickly the shelves got restocked. And what they found was when employees were engaged, shelves got restocked quickly. And when shelves are restocked quickly, product is available for people to buy and your revenues go up. And so they were like, there you go. Like when people are unhappy, they drag their feet and you don't have as much product to sell. Done. Can we now do something to like make this better? And so the organization's like, done. And so I think a lot of the key is working to break down the data silos that separate you from the business outcome, and then play around a little bit, look for relationships, and then try to figure out how those are playing out on the ground so that you have something to manipulate to drive business performance better while making sure your people still have the experience they deserve.
We're glad you called that out because it's really easy for us to hear some of the things we're talking about here and think, oh gosh, I'll give you a data nerd like Ben and Ken are. No, not necessarily. Okay. Yes, you have to speak data. You have to be literate there. But ultimately, it's to do what you just said, Ken, is to get back to this needs to be serving the business and serving the people. If it's just the business or grinding the people to a pulp, then that's probably not the right solution. Let's look for another one. And if the people are all happy and joyful and they're kicking their feet back and they're not restocking those shelves, that's not the answer either. It's somewhere where we are going to get the best from both. So if you're giving some advice to all of our friends out here, listen to us. We have about 5 minutes left in our conversation, and I'd love to hear from you. When it comes to being a little more data-driven, you've given some examples already of how that matters and tying it back to the metrics that the business cares about. Any other things that you would say is kind of a key to success to really making that transition and doing that well?
So I think a couple things that you want to cultivate in yourself is first curiosity. It's really, if you're focused explicitly and always on what is the business activity, you can't imagine the possibilities as easily. So just being curious, being open to seeing like what happens, why might it happen, offers you the room to imagine. But once you have some ideas, that's when you start going, okay, how can I see this? It doesn't have to be perfect. So a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have the exact data that I need to prove this conclusively, so I'll just ignore it. In reality, what you want to do is build up enough credible evidence that the educated guess that anyone would make is the thing you want them to make. Almost, in art, there's the concept of the negative space. You don't need to draw the picture if you basically outline the whole thing. Like, that's a dog. That is the outline of a dog. We're going to move forward with the idea that that is a dog. And that's what a lot of your colleagues in other departments do. They just pretend that's not what they're doing. I think one of the greatest lessons of my career has been realizing how much pressure as a former academic I put on myself to have the exact perfect data and analysis. There's uncontrovertible. And everybody else would just show up with these mishmash, close enough kind of procedures, and they would get their money. I'm like, what's going on? And I realized you don't need to have it exactly right. You need to have it right enough that the best guess is where you're leading people.
I'm thinking like the marginal value of spending twice as much time to be, a little bit more accurate versus spending half that time and saying, listen, we've got enough evidence here. This is really where a logical person would agree with me. And we'll go from there. Like that marginal time could have spent doing something else of value. And that's where I don't want someone to get caught up in hearing this, thinking I've got to get down to like the nth degree, the 15th decimal point. Like, no.
Yeah.
Get close enough, directionally accurate. You're good to go. I was like give a hypothesis and then be directly accurate. Credible evidence is the phrase you used. And let's go from there. So I think that's great. And the first one you said was, cultivate curiosity. I'm a fan of alliteration, so I had to double down on that one. So powerful. Asking lots of questions. Ask just enough questions that it's almost annoying. Like not so much you're driving away, but be a little bit like, hey, tell me more about that. I want to understand that. Don't just say why all the time, but try to dig beneath that, because you'll find some pretty incredible things that you don't know. And that will tell you other ways you can serve, you can add value, because you actually got a better understanding of that. The phrase I always think of, what's his name? Oh, the astrophysicist, Neil, his name, I think. I'm maybe pronouncing it wrong, but he said, as the area of my knowledge grows, so does the perimeter of my ignorance. So the more I know, the more I realize I really don't know that much. There's so much more to know. And so that's the way it is with us. We're in this, we think we know it all, and pull back a little bit, ask more questions, as you said, Ken, and we'll figure out there's more things we can know. And once we know them, we can do some new things too.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid of being wrong on occasion. Like, you put something out there, you get the data, and it says, oh, that program didn't work. Well, can you use that data to figure out why it didn't work and get it to work? Or can you be like, oh, we really should be doing this other thing and that will work? Very much the Thomas Edison perspective of like, the first 100 light bulbs I tried to build didn't work, but that just taught me what doesn't work, and which eventually leads me to the one that does.
I use that one so often, where you think about the red, yellow, green. It's like, it's not just telling you what to do, it's telling you what not to do. And I'm okay narrowing down the things. I want to spend less time probably narrowing down the wrong ones than I do focusing on the right ones. But some of this is saying we found some ways that don't work. We found some ways that light bulb does not work. And we need to make sure that those are on our no fly list for now. Let's focus on some things that do and are going to add some new value. All right. So I want to ask you like 40 more questions. This is so much fun to me. I know the audience is probably appreciating us nerding out on this stuff, and we'll get some good practical takeaways. if they want to dig deeper into some of the things that you're sharing, here's some of the other findings from the research y'all done, you got a link we can drop in the chat. Would that be okay with you?
Absolutely. I'd love for you to all go to our website at hibob.com and check out our blog. Some of the research that I talked about is presented there in our various reports. We're also coming out with a more formal report on the research of HR priorities that you'll be able to access there.
Great. Excellent. Ken, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your passion for using data to help people solve people problems. It's something that I obviously have a kindred spirit here and excited about helping the audience be a little more data driven too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Hey, absolutely. To everybody else out there, stay tuned for more HR Summer School coming right up. All right, coming up. There we go. Let's get us on screen. There we go. Get us back on screen. All right, everybody. You've probably received quite a few emails with links, lots of links. And I think I've got the right ones back out to everybody now. And Jill's also responding on our team behind the scenes. Again, grateful for everybody's grace and love and support in the middle of technical issues. So we're back with you live, and great conversation there with Ken. Because we were busy, George unfortunately did not keep up with his checklist back here. So
I'm going to assume that there was like 11 minimum
11 per minute possibly talking about data, but all not for data's sake. That's the thing that I have to remind myself of as I get wrapped up in the nerdy stuff, and I'm like, I don't care about the numbers themselves, but I care what they tell me.
Yeah.
Right. If you as a leader know that your people need something from you, the data can tell you that, but it's not going to do the work for you. You've got to show up, George.
Yeah, it'll only work if you work it. And so I look at data as
say it again.
It will only work if you work it. A piano doesn't play itself. It needs somebody to be able to make that music and that sound. Drums don't beat themselves. You got to be able to make that sound and make it work. Data doesn't put things into action. You have to move that and make it happen. So you two, like I love data. I love the research, but how do we apply it? How does it tell a story? How do we adapt? What strategies do we need to create? What do we need to retune and maybe get rid of? And so it's always important. I always think of data as change. Without change, there can be no growth. Without data, there can be no growth. You got to have the. Oh, you like that?
Are you trying to get your average of data up? I think
I'm trying to catch up with you, a kid. I'm trying to catch up with you, a kid.
45 more minutes at that pace, and you'll be close. You'll be close.
Great.
Still a close second. All right, so I'm excited because we're going to a conversation with Isha from SoundCloud. We're going to get into total rewards, how they connect to loyalty, and how people feel about the organization. I honestly didn't know if you were going to love this or not, because total rewards is like getting way in the weeds of HR speak. But when it talks about loyalty, connection, and fairness, like those things are near to your heart.
Yeah, I had the opportunity, obviously, to meet Isha over in Paris for Unleash Conference and had a conversation. And then SoundCloud is music in itself, and I love music. And so there was a connection there. It goes to tell you, if you can connect with the human, the conversations become one in themselves because you love the person behind that voice and those words. And so I am now a friend of Total Rewards and understanding how it drives fairness. And so
we'll take it.
And that loyalty. And Isha makes it, even that much better.
Makes it fun. All right. So let's dive into the conversation with Isha. And after that, we'll get to our good friend, Nicole, who's out there in the chat. I've seen her already being active in the last 2 days. We're going to hear from Nicole. Then we'll take our midday break and continue on. So we'll be a little bit behind schedule, as you can probably already tell, but we're going to get all the good stuff in today. We won't miss anything. And we may talk a little bit less. We'll see. Can't promise. All right, here we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited once again, to have another person that I was able to meet actually at Unleash World last year in Paris. So Isha, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, a little bit about your company as well, and then what is your passion?
All right. Hi, George. Nice to reconnect again. So I'm Isha Smith. I'm the Global VP of Total Rewards for SoundCloud. For those who might not know, SoundCloud is a music community. We see ourselves as the community that empowers fans and artists to connect through music. My role spans through total rewards, so compensation, benefits, stock options, learning and development, employee engagement, and people analytics. Passion. I am really passionate about leveling up the playing field, so to speak, and to really see how people develop. That brings me great joy.
Yeah. We talk about total rewards, and there's really a full scope. One of the things I'm really excited about, you say the C word that really triggers my heart, and that's culture. Let's dive into this because a lot of people don't realize the impact that total rewards, when you talk about pay, talk about equality and all these different benefits and things of that nature, you don't think how that affects the culture of a workplace. But can you talk a little bit about how that plays a role in total rewards?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, my role is quite unique because it goes broader than the typical total rewards role. But I see culture as sort of the bigger aspect of total rewards, even, trumping compensation. I think as we look at attracting the right type of candidates that our organization wants and really trying to retain them, to really build a good relationship with them, I think culture comes to the forefront. And so finding ways that will fit the Venn diagram of what the organization wants with what the employee or an individual wants, I think that sweet spot really thrives with the backdrop of great culture and really unpicking that. So I can use the example of what we do at SoundCloud. DEI is really important to us. Representing folks who are emerging creators is really important to us. And so really taking that in and reflecting that on our employee value proposition gives us a real clear focus on how we want to position our benefits, our comm structure, our development opportunities in a way that feels really authentic to the organization. So when candidates come through, it is a seamless experience for them in terms of what they see on a LinkedIn advert or in their conversations with our recruiters and how that brings itself to life when they actually join the company.
Yeah, we talk about different ways. When I think about SoundCloud, especially as you talked about emerging music artists, people who are having dreams, just to be able to have that opportunity. When I think of SoundCloud, the first word that comes into my mind is innovation, right? You got different things, and a lot of things, from previous conversations that we have, you discussed a lot of innovative ways companies can really tailor benefits and rewards to really meet each individual. One thing that's different for George may be different from Sarah or Joel that's over here. So how do you meet the expectations of what is a modern multi-generational workforce from millennials to baby boomers that are still kind of mixing in? How do you get the best of both worlds?
I'm going to preface that by saying it's not always going to work for everyone, and we might not always have the right answer. But the way we look at it is to really, going back to that point of authenticity, it has to link and connect with SoundCloud and what it stands for. And therefore, the idea is to offer a bunch of stuff that resonates with that in a way that employees can pick and choose what matters to them. So an example here is one of the problems I was trying to solve was increasing representation of women and non-binary folk within our tech roles, particularly at senior levels. Another sort of problem was to really find benefits we can work with. So background to that, SoundCloud is a very small company. We've got a big brand footprint, but we are just over 400 employees. We compete with big tech companies and the music companies. So we're constantly trying to do more with not as much at our disposal. And so finding that right balance. So in trying to solve those two problems, but also looking at how we could solve our pay equity gaps, we came up with the idea of putting in place a family forming and fertility benefit. And I'm quite proud to say we were one of the first companies to adopt that in the EU. This was a big benefit in the US. It's been here for a while, but it was quite new in the EU. And for a small company to be one of the early adopters was quite important for me personally to make that happen. But that did solve some of those problems, right? So we're trying to say, we may not be able to pay 90th percentile of the market, what a Google or an Amazon or Meta might pay, but we can give real strong benefits. So we introduced that. It also aligns with our DEI commitment as well. So that benefit is open to all, no matter your gender, no matter whether you're using it as an employee or your partner's going to use it. We want benefits that work for our employees and their lives. So the idea was to attract young folks because the average clouder is quite young, tie that into the equality of the DEI aspect, tie that into sort of really enabling men, women, folks of all genders to use this benefit And then tying also all of that back to what we do for parental leave, which is a set amount of weeks, again, regardless of gender or the way in which you form a family. So that I think is a good example to bring that to life.
Yeah, you talk about the culture, you talk about, the innovation of really doing your best, right? It won't meet everybody's needs. We're human. It's impossible to please everybody, right? And be able to find that balance. But when you are thriving, when you are innovating, when you are showing that effort as an organization to where you're a place that people want to be a part of, although you're small, 400 people is a lot of people that says, hey, I want to be here.
Mhm.
How does that then affect other aspects of the business in terms of where there's healthy total rewards, where there's healthy benefits, where there's healthy compensation, where I feel like I belong and my employer is taking care of me? What's the effect that you've seen on performance?
That is a brilliant question. I think performance is such a evolving beast, right? Because again, like you say, we're humans, so a lot of things impact performance. Some of those might be outside the business's control. There are a lot of personal elements that go into it. I think from my vantage point, having that total rewards piece that goes beyond compensation and benefits and along the lines of a lifestyle, so whether it is flexibility and giving folks true flexibility. So this goes beyond saying, oh, we've got summer Fridays or we've got holidays. When I mean flexibility, I mean being able to work in a global workplace around my life. And that's important to me as a person. I've got a child who's quite young, but I know other folks at SoundCloud for whom flexibility is important because they are keen travelers and they want to be able to work from abroad, or they want to be able to visit the New York office, take a week to go somewhere else and work from there. And I think once you have that broad proposition in place, performance as employees lean into it really charts along, because suddenly you can bring that value proposition to life, whereby I feel truly invested in working for SoundCloud and really working in a way that, fulfills my deep desires as well. Another thing in terms of performance is our focus on performance development or performance management. So, George, you touched on innovation before. We had a very traditional, outdated performance management framework, standard ratings, once a year evaluation, and boom, you get your rating, you get your compensation adjustment. And we've gone a little bit radical and we've abolished ratings. We've thrown them out of the window. We just do conversations now. So our pillars are goals, growth, and everything in between is conversations. Is that perfectly implemented yet? No, it's a journey, but that ties to that performance graph. The more we take on board this culture shift internally, the better our performance evaluations will be, and the less they'll feel like a chore, more a way of life, and just a culture that we adopt.
What are some of those advantages, and where there's advantages, there's also challenges, right? Of decoupling compensation from performance evaluation. How might this contribute to, like we talk about DEI? How does this contribute to a more inclusive workplace and a work environment where this feels like I'm part of this? I'm a part of this change and this performance evaluation, and it's meaningful to me and beneficial as well.
So our endeavor is to really meet clouders where they are rather than where we would like them to be. What I mean by that is, I've said before, we've got a young workforce, or a younger than average workforce. The average SoundClouder is 33. We want to really develop them and make their time at SoundCloud meaningful in their long career. So when we then talk about performance, I think it's the ability to grow and not have to wait 6 months down the line to get a rating that might then help you fix something that actually, if George had told me today that I messed up or that I did really well, that's an immediate impact, right? So you're getting 6 months back to either really build someone's confidence and help them get to where they need to be, or just give them a pat on their back and have those 6 months of, being on a little bit of a high from your awesome performance, rather than parking it to when you have to do the conversation, and for that to become performative rather, and just part of a process rather than something meaningful that actually helps you get to where you need to be.
Yeah. When we did research, very recently, we did a generational comparison in some of our research with our talent acquisition trends. And one of the things that was really, pointing out to me was how Gen Z, millennials, and, Gen X and boomers all, had different, perspectives and motivations and preferences, right? Some of the factors motivated them to apply for a job. And one of the biggest ones that we saw was work-life balance, right? We saw job security and responsibilities, but we also saw competitive salary and benefits. Those were in the top three for, of course, the Gen Zs and millennials. And one of the things that I realized Gen X as number one is competitive salary and benefits. One of the striking things that kind of came from this conversation, as I personally started having conversations with individuals from each group, was what Total Rewards does to a person, not just in their performance, not just in the workplace culture and how they feel, believe, and behave most of the time, but also the effects that it has on their well-being. And that has become obviously a top priority over the last 5-6 years. How can companies and organizations, and we're speaking to 5,000 plus HR pros right now, how can companies design a rewards and benefits program that really supports the mental, the emotional, the physical, financial, right? That's why a lot of us do this, well-being that is beyond or maybe inclusive with this traditional compensation?
I mean, the research is really interesting, right? So I was looking at something, and Randstad put out some research earlier this year that said for the first time in the 22 years of them charting this data, work-life balance has overtaken compensation in terms of what employees want, which is a bit of a light bulb moment in terms of where we're headed to. Now, all that is good. I do love my work-life balance, but as you say, the financial side of it is also important. I think for me, and I'm speaking for me rather than for SoundCloud at this point, but I think for me, it is really important to go to the bottom line of what your business needs. Because I can say, yes, we want a hybrid connection first approach, which is what we do here. But another business might be a manufacturing business or a sales business where they need people to be on the shop floors. They can't do that. So they need to find their own way of positioning this total reward piece with wellness and well-being in the backdrop in a way that works for them. So I think authenticity to your business and the business needs is really important before you try to do something that research or data tells you is what people want. Because ultimately, the business needs to be able to succeed in order to then build the layers of all of these lovely things that we want to have and want to offer to employees. So I think really paring that down to what is important to the business. What do employees want? Because, I've been doing this for 12, 13, 15 years now. Something that's remained constant is the disconnect between what the business thinks is on the employee's mind compared to what the employees actually think and, what's keeping them up at night. So I think really going down into the data of your engagement surveys and even anecdotal data, listening sessions, I think really taking a look at that holistically is a good starting point of how you can build a total rewards model that can then leverage benefits and well-being.
You mentioned the word authenticity and the importance of not just taking research and data that we hear, see, or even for us provide, but how does this apply? When you said authenticity, the thing that ran in my head was we must, as leaders, know our people and not just assume what they need. And so the importance of leadership involvement for those of you who are in the total rewards area, like Isha, don't just put things out just to put them out because this is what we desire. It's important, as Isha is saying, and what I believe you're saying is you got to know your people and how this aligns with your business, your values, and who you are, but also who they are as individuals and what they need specifically, and not just assume that what works for another company is going to work for yours, right? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I mean, another example is, you see company behaviors and leadership values being put out there top down. Now, that might be all well and good, but if everyone is not involved, then you risk kind of eroding those values because your folks aren't buying into that. So that disconnect, I think the more we can eliminate that, knowing fully well, we can't completely put that to one side, but the more we can eliminate that, I think the stronger position we'll be in.
Yeah, we're coming up at our time. I want to give you the floor to just encourage, inspire, if there's anything that's on your heart that you want to share with the audience to kind of wrap this conversation up.
I think Total Rewards, it has grown so much during the time of my career. And I think it's such a beautiful place to be in, to bring everything that we've talked about to life and make it really meaningful. So I think I would encourage everyone to look beyond what they see on paper, that it's compensation, benefits, and to really look beyond that and expand it, to look at culture, to look at the pain points. You know, we talked about understanding what is important to employees. It may seem a bit, fluffy, blue sky thinking, but the nuggets you get from that can really inform your strategy and the execution of that strategy, finding the ways where those levers can really, be pulled in a way that benefits employees and the organization. So I think I would encourage everyone to broaden their horizons and to look beyond the blinkers of Total Rewards. And you might find, a unicorn somewhere that really pushes your strategy forward.
Awesome. Where can people connect with you, if they want to stay in touch, social media, or is there a website that they can, reach out to you?
Folks can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy for anyone to connect and always up for a chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Isha. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you so much for joining us here at HR Summer School.
Thank you, George. I hope everyone at the summer school has a fantastic time.
All right. Sometimes we have people that call it summer camp. Like we need an HR summer camp, George. I feel like that could be a fun opportunity.
I think there's something brewing there. We had winter breaks, we've had fall breaks.
We had a little bit of everything.
We've not had an HR summer school camp.
We have not. I mean,
what's your favorite thing about a camp? You're in the small town in Falkville, Alabama.
I'm going to camp with some kids next week.
Yep.
And they're like, hey, can you do games? I'm like, okay, sure. So we'll do some games. I learned the hard way. Blindfolded kickball, not a good game. Yep. Kids just run the other kids, smack into the other one, and no one pays attention. So there's that. I
was thinking of some kids getting blasted with a kickball right to the face.
It's not the kick. I'm supposed to be. It's like trust.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lead you around. I'm just paying attention. Like I want to get there first. And I'm just shoving you. Like you can see where you're going, and they just run smacking each other. So.
I was thinking, like a campfire with some of your favorite
s'mores,
conversations that happen around camp. You went straight blindfold.
Kickball. I mean, yes, there may be some emotional scars there from that. I'm just saying.
Right.
So
Ben's not in charge of games for HR Summer School Camp.
Lordy. So I wrote down two things.
Yep.
You guys talked to Isha. My takeaways, two things that I thought were important. I saw this in the chat too from some of you talking about flexibility. I saw someone share that their organization is doing 4-day work weeks during the summertime. Like those sorts of things are examples of that. And one of the things that's hard to do is we often have leaders that are stuck on this is a constant, it can't change, like 5 days a week has to be how it's done. And flexibility, when we ask workers how they define that, it's when I work, it's how I work. Do I have any autonomy or choice, or am I put in a box and told, I don't get any freedom or flexibility? And then the third piece is how I grow. Do I have a chance to find other opportunities? Can I build a new skill? Can I put George in a situation that's a little awkward the first time, but it's going to be good for you long-term because you're going to learn how to do something you need to do. So the flexibility piece, and one other one, I knew you'd love this. So I learned early on in my career when I had a leader that was like, oh yeah, I got an open door policy. I learned very quickly that physically the door was open, but emotionally the door was not open. They did not want to hear from me. They did not want to hear questions. They did not want to be challenged. They didn't want anything like that. They just wanted all the good stuff, and that was it. And so I learned early on that it's not just having an open door with these leaders, but having an open heart.
I'm loving it already because like bringing the human back into that space when you have an open door policy is so important. As we were talking here, we're talking about camp. and I think this kind of transitioned in some of our conversations. Shout out to Jennifer. She came up with the acronym. She's Professor George's favorite.
She's challenging you. There we go.
Courageous, amazing, memorable people. When it comes to having an open door policy, you got to be courageous because you never know what's coming in. You got to be able to make sure those people leave, have an amazing heart, have an amazing spirit, whatever it is, make a memory. One of the most important memories is not about somebody making me laugh and have fun. Those are cool memories, but memories that really lasted for me in the workplace was those people who understood where I was when I was in a tough moment. And they took my struggles, because we talk about work-life balance, and sometimes we talk about leaving your problems at home and don't bring them to the workplace. But I am George, and George is filled with whatever it is. If it's good work, good home, bad home, I can't leave nothing behind. I'm running with one, and having those leaders who are human and being there to show up for people is so important. That memory is important, and then you care for the people. So Jennifer, you're going to win a prize. You're coming.
Whatever George can get to you, he's going to get you one of everything. So like, there's that. Well, I wasn't going to share this till a little later. We'll just shortcut our break in a little bit. But I was going to. One of the things I had pulled up yesterday in the conversation, I thought about the first person that took a chance on me at work. She actually got the company to pay for my last year of school to get my degree in HR. Who knows where I would have been, otherwise. And she knew at the time I was going to work for her for another year. So she got that benefit there of me being an indentured servant for a little longer. But for me, it was, she went to bat for me. She believed in me. I just sent her a note yesterday. I said, hey, I'm not sure if you remember this all those years ago, but I just appreciate you for taking that chance. And she was like, hey, I just retired, but it's great to know that those things make such an impact and that it helps you. So you never know when that little thing that you do for somebody else is going to be that thing that connects to that memory that you were talking about, or the thing they're bringing to work. Like, that's part of that bigger story. So excellent. All right. We're having some fun, if you can't tell. So we're going to get into this next conversation with Nicole. I hope you have your pencil sharpened. She's got some great ideas. She's going to challenge you to think bigger. She has an incredible Substack where she shares all of her ideas. We'll make sure and try to make that get into the chat, the comments, so you can follow Nicole after this, because I know you're going to want to. So let's get this one pulled up and get ready to go. Emily, so glad you're here with us and looking forward to a great conversation here with Nicole. We're going to get into some nerdy stuff, but also some really practical and helpful things for all of you. She and I have had a lot of fun sort of prepping for this and getting ready for the session. So Nicole, I'm glad you're here. Looking forward to talking about how we can all be a little bit more insightful in how we approach the work we're doing and be problem solvers, all those sorts of things. Before we get into the fun stuff, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Ben. I love HR Summer School, and I've been collecting T-shirts. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
No pressure. I'm not going to get your T-shirt. Okay.
Right. I need a T-shirt. So my name is Nicole. Obviously, it's on the screen, and I currently work with Vail Resorts. I am doing this really super fun job that we don't usually get to do in HR. My counterparts are both industrial engineers. And I am digging into all of our HR systems and processes. I get to touch all of the untouchable third rails. I get to ask all of the why questions. And I sort of landed here by taking a pretty hard left turn into what felt like leaving HR, but was actually digging deeper into the systems underneath HR. So I took a role in people analytics, and then I took this role. And so the last 3 years now have really taught me that a lot of the dysfunction that we live with every day in HR wasn't designed maliciously. It was designed because we codified the wrong questions. We put in place systems that solved a surface level problem, and no one stopped and said, wait, is this what we actually need to do?
I feel like those old pictures, like the games I was doing as a kid, where you're just like, something zoomed in so much, you're like, what is this thing? And you can't tell what it is because you're so close to it. When you come out, like, oh, obviously that was a comb, but it's like this close, you can't tell what it is or whatever the thing was. I feel like you have that chance to zoom out a little bit and say, hey, look, if we move this thing over here, we'd be way faster, it'd be more effective, it would help this other audience too. Like, you can have that perspective, but most of us are so heads down, focused on doing things day to day, that we miss some of those sorts of insights. So Can we agree now we're going to give some of those out to the audience on ways to pull back a little bit and think about that through this conversation?
Yeah, and of course
Yeah.
there's an acronym. I mean, I just for George had to create one, and thanks for helping out with that too, Ben.
Absolutely.
But the acronym that I'm going for, I'm grounding in this historical idea of a nomad. And nomads, we think of them as aimless wanderers. And sometimes when you look at my career path, it looks like an aimless wanderer. But what nomads had was the ability to recognize and to sense patterns and to be able to put together things that didn't look like they belonged together. I keep talking about this idea of a bridge-shaped specialist. So instead of a T-shaped, like depth in one area, you need depth in several areas that don't look like they belong together so that you can be the translator between them. And so the nomads were the people who spread the stories, who spread the seeds, who went from one place to the next and collected these pieces from different groups and then seeded them in others. And so when you think about this acronym, I'm going to go through the letters, and some of them are going to feel a little repetitive for a moment, but I promise they're different from each other. So the N is notice assumptions. So really ground yourself in, what are we taking for granted without realizing it? What are we assuming when we are starting with this process? And sometimes those assumptions, it takes a moment to get to them, because sometimes it feels uncomfortable to push against them. Like if you find yourself starting to ask a question and your stomach hurts, that's a really good sign that there's some deep baked assumptions there, right? So one of my favorite ones to pick on is performance reviews. And so we've all worked in organizations where we have performance reviews and they just feel like a check the box activity. And so if we're talking about automating that, then one of the things we might do is say, okay, well, maybe we can just capture managers' feedback throughout a 6-month time frame, and we can use some sort of natural language processing AI solution to make that faster. Well, okay, but that's the surface level interpretation. If we stop there, we might be actually just encoding that dysfunction and not asking the right questions. So stepping back, what do our performance review system, what does it actually reward today? If we want it to drive growth for our people, and it's not doing that, it's just serving a compliance function, the last thing we want to do is automate that dysfunction. We want to step back. So noticing like what we are assuming about our systems, where does it assume competency? Where does it assume limitations? What boundaries does it think are there and that are going to stay there? Because we're in a very rapidly shifting time, right? So that's the notice piece. And yeah, really checking in with your gut, right? Like if it feels scary to touch, there's probably something big there.
All right,
So
next is O.
what was that?
I said, that's
O
the
is
end. What next is
observe.
O?
Yeah, observe reality. So like this is what do we say happens versus what actually happens. You've all been in that situation where you're following your GPS and it's like, turn here, and you look and there's these construction barriers in the way. And you're like, wait, I can't turn there. Thank you, Google Maps. Like, we're not friends anymore. And so like, where are those gaps, and where do the stories and the structures that are told just sort of fall apart? And why? Right? So going back to asking deeper questions. So the next step is make friends, which is a fun one, even if you're an introvert. So when you're making friends, you're not just making the easy friends. You're not just making friends with the people who sit next to you or who have the same job or work in the same function. You're really deliberately looking at how you can make friends that will help you grow beyond your own framework. I mean, we're all limited by our own perceptions of reality, right? Like there's actual reality, and then there's the things that we see about it through our own lens. If you make friends in functions that are different from yours, you expand your framework, and you do it organically with conversation. You just start to notice, we're going back to noticing, right? Where the things you assume are completely different from the things that they assume. The next step is to ask. And so you're not just asking random questions here. You're not asking hard questions just to be the annoying voice in the room. You're asking questions to validate what you've gathered in those earlier phases, right? So I noticed this felt dangerous. I saw that this was different from how we said it works. My friends in IT are experiencing this pain point, and the story that I've built out of that information is this. How does that story land with your experience? And this is another one of those chances to, like, where you're making friends has actually really helped you, because now you can test that with the people who are like you and the people who are not like you. And the gaps are information, right? Where people push back, where people get big feelings about something, there's huge data there. And then we finally made it to the last letter, Ben. We're here. This is the part that's going to feel a little hard for some people. So this is the stage where I say you dip in. So you're going to start talking to those friends you made and find out what they're working on. Ask to be involved in project meetings. Ask to be involved in projects that are outside of your natural wheelhouse. Sometimes you're just going to listen. It's just going to be building intuition. But sometimes you hold the answers that they're going to need and not know that they need because they don't share your framework. It was long.
My brain is just wrapping around all these pieces. So the letters NOMAD, like that stands for different pieces of this. Can I go back and ask some questions about different parts? You okay
Yeah,
with that?
absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things you sort of highlighted IT as an example in there around where you can go and make friends, ask around, like connecting to the people around you. If someone's listening to this, what are some titles, some roles, knowing that every organization is different, what are some titles or roles they may need to look at if they're trying to figure out a problem or make some new friends, we'll say?
You know, some of the natural question askers in any organization are the business analysts. So if you happen to have a robust IT function, then you usually have the business analysts whose actual job is to go ask people questions about what they need and then translate those needs over to the engineers so that they can build the things that are needed. Project managers, program managers can be very similar. They have a more like holistic lens on how things fit together. But honestly, I started with just the systems engineers. It was like, what do you do? And I saw you made this choice when you designed it. Why? What limitations were you working around? Like, just sort of, I don't know, I lead with curiosity. I extrovert through ideas. This feels easy to me. And I recognize it can feel dangerous to some, but I promise you, people love to talk about themselves. Like, just ask what they do and then start digging deeper.
Okay. So one of the things you also talked about was, I wish I'd written it down because it was a great way to capture it. Basically, when there's big feelings, when there's some kind of response in others, you've hit something that may be uncomfortable. We're going to get into this and figure out what's going on. Talk about that piece a little bit, because it's almost like you're creating a confrontation or creating a problem where people are fine letting it lay over there under the rug, but you're like, hey, look what I found. And you're creating some friction there intentionally because you're trying to take care of it. But talk about that a little bit. What sort of approach is best? How do you maybe make it about the problem, about the person? Like, talk about that piece of it, if you don't mind.
Well, I think you really hit on it, right? It's about the problem, not about the person. So if somebody has built their career around a specific process or function, and that specific process or function is going away, I mean, we're in a phase where that is going to start happening to more and more and more people. And I don't remember who said it, but if your career is built around something, you are incentivized to pretend like challenges to it do not exist. I mean, think of Kodak. Kodak invented digital cameras long before anyone else, but their business was paper and film. We all learned this in business school if you went to business school. Paper and film. So they just pushed off and pushed off and pushed off that project. And then they got scooped. Like, the innovation is coming for you, whether you want to lift that rug or not. And this is where making friends helps, right? Like being kind and people knowing you and knowing you're coming from a place of care. You're not just poking the bear to wake it up and make it angry, you know? I think there's also like we don't like dealing with feelings at work. We're getting better, but we don't like it. And we've done, at risk of running into a rabbit hole, sorry, Ben, we've done ourselves a disservice with this attitude. So when we think about change management, we talk all the time about how we have to overcome resistance. Resistance is this thing to overcome, but resistance is data. If people have big feelings about something, then there is something there that they care about. So what do they care about? What are they afraid of losing? What are they afraid they won't be able to do? Like if there's a boundary underneath the rug you're lifting up, what does that fear tell you about the actual problem?
The answer isn't to steamroll it, Nicole. Are you sure?
No.
Just like run right over it. There are no
mean,
feelings here.
You
It's the
can try
business.
that. You can try that. Feelings don't belong in the workplace, you know.
Ugh.
We're
But
all robots.
That's like the leader who rules by fear, right? That you get
Oh.
results for a little bit, but not for long term. That's what you get when you steamroll over people in the middle of a change. Is they're going to remember that when the time comes.
Oh,
They're going to
yeah.
remember that, and if they stay, even it's going to be a different environment, different buy-in, everything else, because they remembered that in their moment of need, they were run over versus at least listened to. Even right, it's still going to happen, but talk to me, Nicole. What are you really worried about? Tell me more about that. Okay, well, listen.
So-
Here's what's true. Here's what's not. Like that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those things, right? We talk all the time about tech debt. Like what debt do we have in our tech stack that where we've worked around things and we've codified like workarounds because that's what we had as a limitation and we didn't ask the questions. So, you know, kind of going back to this, like ask better questions. There's also people debt, there's change debt. When you've managed change poorly in the past, you can have all the best talking points, you can have all the prettiest slides, and people are still not going to believe you. They're not going to trust you. And rebuilding that trust is so much harder. And this is where, like, kind of going back to this framework, if you're asking these kinds of questions, if you're digging in and understanding these sources of resistance, you're asking the questions that need to be asked. So thinking through like what this looks like for us in HR today. We are the future partners of the engineers who are building all of these AI solutions. They can come in and they can automate the things that we are already doing poorly. And we all know that resume reviews have a lot of bias baked in, right? If we're trying to measure talent based on past performance, and we're looking at resumes, we're searching for keywords. But if we're trying to hire for innovation, a lot of the people who are innovative don't have linear paths. And we also do the same thing in interviews. So we're like, okay, we need to be able to interview people faster. Let's train an AI bot so it can pick up all of the elements of a STAR interview. And then we'll say, okay, this person passes, this person doesn't. And we don't even have to look at the video, except that, again, the people who tend to be innovative don't tend to be polished in their first draft. So if you are looking for people who are curious, you are looking for people who pull from disparate things and connect all the dots, your STAR interviews aren't going to find that person.
I almost went down my own rabbit trail, like what keywords I would use to find Nicole. So I want to ask you a question here before we get to the time goes so fast. Before we get to the end here, I want to ask you a question that I think would be a great takeaway for the audience. And it's really, you talked a lot about curiosity to start us off today and like wove that through the conversation. If someone says, I'm not as curious as I could be or I should be, what are some questions that we could ask at work, of others, of processes? Just, again, gently poking the bear, maybe just to see what's there. But we're trying to start this conversation at work, trying to open this door a little bit. What are some ways to start asking questions there if they're not sure where to start? Any ideas on some things you could ask as HR leader doing this?
One of these phrases, this is going to sound super corporate robot, and I'm sorry, but one of the phrases that pops up at work all the time is the what must be true, right? Okay. And so really thinking through, like, if you think what must be true for this process to work the way you think it should, like, okay, let's take a step back from that. Why must that be true? What are we trying to actually solve here? And we do this all the time with metrics, right? We love a good KPI, but a lot of the things we care about aren't easily measurable. And so we pick a proxy, and it's a hypothesis. We're like, okay, well, we think this will stand in for it. But once it's on the pretty dashboard, we never ever question it again, because we get so addicted to the dopamine hit of watching the number rise and fall, and we can track it and we can talk about it, and it makes a great slide. Everything that you are attached to is an opportunity for a question. Everything, like I keep going back to this gut feeling. If it makes you scared, that's where you ask a question. And you're not asking in service to disruption, although that's the probable outcome. You're asking in service to not making future you go back and curse past you.
I love that you're talking about gut in this context, because you are such a data person that talking about your gut, but you're not saying do the thing that's comfortable, the thing that feels right, the thing that makes you feel good. Like where it feels kind of weird and wonky, that may be the best place to start asking questions, because your gut may be a better predictor of those things than of the things that just make you comfortable and happy and satisfied. Going back to bias a minute ago, right? That's a real thing. Yeah. So I love that that's the angle that you took there. So we could spend the next hour like unpacking this, going all these directions, and I would love to, but I know we have to move on. If the audience wants to hear more about this kind of thing and how you're sharing big ideas and helping us have this bigger and more insightful lens on the work of an HR professional, how do they follow you?
So I'm super active on LinkedIn. You'll see my HR tag, my tagline is HR philosopher. And that's really because I like playing with ideas.
No one's surprised now hearing that.
Right.
Yes.
And I also post a lot on Substack, and
Perfect.
I typically link them together on my LinkedIn.
Perfect. So we'll go ahead and link to the Substack here in the chat. So anyone out there listening here can just go ahead and follow you. It's easy to pop your email in. You can follow Nicole and all the good stuff she's sharing. And it is my hope that she makes your stomach hurt just a little bit, because you're thinking differently about some of the work you're doing, and you take a bigger perspective on that overall. Thank you so much, my friend, for joining me. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.
All right. That was so fun. I like the stomach ache test, Nicole. Yeah. Like came up with something fun there.
Yeah, it's, I may have a different type of stomach ache because all the cake balls, Oreo cake balls.
That's a problem.
Yes. So it's a different type of ache. But, obviously for me, I'm going to skip the stomach ache. That was great. I'm going to go to the acronym, and I'm just going to applaud her for that, because that's beautiful. I have it up on the screen. I kept it there.
Can y'all see it like back there? We've got a running total of our acronyms up there on the board. We'll have to make sure that's visible from the camera next up.
We'll add the acronyms to our upcoming notebook.
Yes.
And
maybe.
But yeah, beautiful. Good afternoon. And of course, Nicole is phenomenal. So and everybody is loving her in the chat. And so we knew you would. Yeah. She has a lot of great stuff in that session. And we were going to take a break, Ben.
We were,
but we want to make sure that those who are tuned in for this time, we're going to keep it rolling for our speakers.
Yeah,
we'll have announcements and all that great stuff, and some winners.
Give away a ton of stuff at the end today, so we're going to skip over this middle break we normally do. Try to get us closer back to time as best we can. So we're going to go to Shar Talk from Clark. We're going to go to that conversation around performance, which was so fun. Again, not knowing when we put these together what everybody's going to talk about. Nicole talked about performance management, how it's not great. And so Shar Talk and I are going to go deep into that, about how we often set that up in the worst possible way. And I've been guilty of it, so I'll raise my hand here. We do it the wrong way. So we're going to get into that and take a look in the chat. Barry, I want to ask you to post this again out there, the link. So the team over at Clark are actually giving away some gift cards, I believe it was. And so, yeah, he's dropping a link there into a short survey around what's going on with your performance management process, your approach, those things like that. Get your feedback on it from the community. So you respond to that, and they're going to work on giving some of those gift cards away, in addition to all the other stuff we're going to be doing later on today.
Thank you so much.
Good. All right. Here we go. We're so glad you're here with us at Summer School, and I'm looking forward to another really insightful conversation here, diving into performance, how to get the best from our people, how to enable them to be their best at work, all those good things. And I'm so excited to be joined by Shar Talk from Clark. We're going to dive into some of the stuff they're doing to help along that front as well. We're thankful to them for supporting Summer School this year. So welcome, my friend. Glad you're here with us.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's so good to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to get at some good things here around performance and how to enable that, how to bring out our people's best. But before we get to all that fun stuff, take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please.
Yep. So my name's Sharthok, and in Starbucks, I go by Steve. It's just much easier that way. I'm one of the co-founders of Clar, the company and the platform. And before Clar happened, interestingly, I was in HR for 8 years. And the bulk of my HR experience was in HR business partnering, performance management, talent management. That's the gamut of things I've looked at across 3 companies. And in those 8 years, I used a bunch of platforms and had lots of experiences where I felt that there were gaps, not only in the platforms, but in how companies look at performance management. And then I validated those gaps with people leaders that, hey, am I only seeing this, or are you seeing this as well? And people leaders said that we are seeing this as well. And that's how Clar was born. We're live in North America across 250 companies. So yeah, that's a little bit about us.
I can imagine when you're saying, hey, listen, I'm just trying to sanity check this. Is this what you're seeing too? They're thinking,
yeah,
hey man, yes, I'm not crazy. Like we're all seeing this. We're all feeling the same sort of thing. And I don't know what it is about performance as a practice, the process in most companies. But when I ask people like, hey, what are you thinking about? What could be better? It's one of the first things they say, this could definitely be improved, even if they don't always know how it could be. So I'm excited to hopefully give them some ideas, some takeaways in the conversation today to get them just from not liking or hating where they are to some ideas about how to make that better. So to start us off, what do you think is the biggest issue right now with how companies manage and support the performance of their people today?
There are so many. Where do I even start? But if I were to boil it down to one issue, that one issue is that when people are doing something or taking an action, no matter what it is, there needs to be an incentive for people to take an action. Humans are wired this way, right? So the what's in it for me, or what we call in the tech parlance, the WIIFM, that is not defined for performance management. And that is why it feels like such a huge time sink, such a heavy lift, and all of those things which people complain about. Essentially, people don't get value from the process, and it starts feeling like something which HR is pushing on us. And that's the biggest issue of performance management today, which is why you hear so many people referring that as the first thing that can be improved.
It's funny, this week we had other HR business partners come and do a session on the how to do that well. And one of the things she called out specifically was, this can't just be another HR thing we're putting on top of people. It's what you're saying. Part of that problem is it's perceived that way. Even if it's ultimately we're saying, hey, we want you, Sharthok, to be better at your job so you can perform better, you can accelerate your career, do all these things. But they see it through the lens of, hey, we got this checklist, and can you make sure you've done this 2 things? Did you do your self-review? Let's get your manager. And it just feels like more work instead of there's a positive outcome to it. So that's one of the things you called out there as a big issue, a big challenge. And I would completely agree with that. So what's the answer? What are some things we can do, the people listening in here, maybe to turn that around and talk about the what's in it for me from that employee perspective, or showcase how this is actually worthwhile to invest their time in?
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that, number one, performance management is like a fingerprint. I always say this to all HR leaders whenever I'm demoing. It's as unique as a fingerprint. There's no set formula that if something happened well in company A, you replicate that performance process, it's going to be equally good in company B. It doesn't work like that. It depends on your stage, maturity, and so on and so forth. So the first thing is to realize that and not to blindly copy paste what's happening elsewhere. The second thing is to drill down into the root causes, which is something I'm really passionate about. And of course, because of Clar, I do a lot. That how do you define the what's in it for me? And it's important to realize, why aren't people getting that value? Or what are they getting instead? They're getting a checklist, like you mentioned, from HR folks, right? And if you look at it at the core, performance has become a retrospective documentation activity. It's almost like a compliance, it's retrospective. So essentially, how it can be done better is if employees are getting real-time help. So the first thing that I would definitely highlight is, whichever platform or whatever you're using, if you can give employees insights which help them do their work better, Those insights can come from managers, those insights can come from peers, they can come from the platform itself. There's not a single person I've spoken to, unless they're massively checked out. Everybody has one common trait. They want to perform better. They genuinely do. And if you are giving them those insights which help them perform better, they will find value in that process. And similarly, if you look at it from a manager perspective, what does a manager essentially want? A manager wants their teams to perform well. A manager wants, contrary to LinkedIn, managers are not evil. I've spoken with so many of them, and they're like, hey, Sharthak, we realize that we need to give feedback. It's just that everybody's just neck deep in work, and sometimes we forget. And even when we remember, it's like transactional feedback. So if you can share insights with managers, which help them cull out that feedback, which is meaningful to employees, and also helps managers cut down on their time investment for performance, I think those are the two things which really help in generating value for managers and employees, apart from 3 or 4 other things. But those are the two I would definitely focus on.
Okay, so I want to go back to that first one, because as you share that, I'm thinking that I think that's a really unique perspective. And I'm thinking back over some of the companies where I worked in HR leader too, just like you. And I'm like, oh yeah, the way we did it here would have been wildly unfit for this other type of organization, and vice versa. So if someone's listening to this conversation right now and they're thinking, how do I know if my performance process is fit to the fingerprint of my business, the stage we're in, all sorts of things? What are maybe some symptoms or some signs that performance process is not fit in the right way? Does that make sense? What should they be looking for as maybe cracks in the mortar or something else that are signs that they may need to adapt that or change that?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant question, and that's what we call like an post indicator. Like it's a lagging indicator, right? The performance process has been run, and now if the signs would be very apparent. The signs would be your employees coming to you and asking you, Ben, what the hell are we doing over here? Like, why do I have to spend so much time doing all of these things? Those are the telltale symptoms. Or you would find people feeling shortchanged at the end of the process and saying that, yeah, I don't agree with the rating. Like, I feel genuinely shortchanged. I did so much more. And if it's beyond a certain number, usually employee grievances are around 5%, 5 to 10%. But if it's beyond that, it's a symptom that something's going awry or wrong over here. But I would, and I learned this the hard way as an HR professional, that I would urge you to look at things even before it starts, right? Not lagging indicators, but leading indicators. So when you're designing, or when an HR professional is designing a performance process, the first thing to ask is not how the process will run. The first thing to ask is, why am I even designing this process? What do I expect to get out of that process? And I see your reaction, and I think you resonate with that. What are we doing over here? What do I expect to get out of the process? Why does the business need it in the first place? Because it's not an HR initiative. If the business has different sorts of goals, Klar is right now the stage at where we're moving from a 1 to 100, right? Earlier, we were at 0 to 1. And there are companies who have been there, for behemoths who are moving from 100 to 1,000 or whatever it is. Every phase is unique and distinct. So you need to ask, what are we getting out of this, and why are we even doing this in the first place? And that will dictate how your performance process should be, like how simple, how complex, and how it flows. So that's what I usually say.
I'm thinking about when I worked for an organization, we had about 90% of our workforce was direct bill to the client. And so their hours mattered a lot where we put those. And so if we said, hey, listen, we need you to take time to do this process, it can't just be an HR process, because they may never fly, right? It may never do that. We're like, listen, we're doing this thing so that ultimately we're serving that customer better, because we're making sure that your skills are aligned with what they need, you're performing well, all those. We're going to talk about why we're investing their time instead of in billable hours, but in actual HR processes and overhead processes. And so we had to have a really clear vision for that. And for me, that when you talked about know why you're doing it, it's not for the sake of the process. It's not just to get this checklist done. It's not so I can say, yep, I accomplished my goal as an HR person of getting everybody to put up with this process, but maybe we helped this number of people find a new role in the business because they realized their skills were a better fit for that through these performance conversations. Or we helped someone get a vision of where they could be and where they could contribute in a meaningful way. And instead of leaving, they stuck around and they told other people about how great this company was that saw the potential in them. Those are the things that we're trying to get out of this. The hope that we're going to create a process that elevates performance, not just looks at retrospectively looks at performance and documents where it was, but let's see where we're going and chart a path for that. Would you say that that sort of mindset of going from just backward looking to forward looking is one of the things that is a hallmark of a successful approach?
So I kind of lost you in the middle, and it's got nothing to do with you. It's my internet perks of working from home. Are you saying, was the question that if the process is more forward looking compared to like a backward retrospective process, it's something which would motivate people more? Is that the question?
Yes, really. Is that one of the hallmarks of a successful approach? When we go from just looking at retroactive, like what happened in the past, to what's happening next? Is that one of the things that switches over from process is just kind of HR thing to this is a business process that's adding value?
I would say definitely one of the things. One major thing is how you make it a forward-looking process. But I think we also ascribe a lot more importance to this particular fact, or we cling on to this fact a lot more and not drill down into other root causes. There's no harm in looking back at things, because if you don't do that, you're not going to improve. But that can't be the only thing that you're doing. And the disconnect which people feel is that, imagine this, Ben, like I set goals in January, I forget all about them, my manager doesn't bother about them. Come December, we are doing a postmortem about why Sharthuk has not been able to deliver. I mean, what were we doing for the 12 months, right? So postmortem, and that's the sort of thing which people kind of hate. There's no harm in looking back at things, but the frequency needs to be much more frequent. So if you're doing it month-wise, or if a month is a little bit of an overkill, you can do it per quarter-wise. But essentially, help me get better, because if you're giving me feedback at the end of a quarter or at the end of a month, then I understand that, hey, these are the areas which have been going well, and this is where I need to do better. But then I have 11 months, or let's say 9 months, to do better. You can't just come up to me and say at the end of the year that, okay, you did, your work, but you are what we call a meets expectations. I mean, how bad does that feel? So yeah, definitely forward looking, and also give feedback much more frequently.
I feel like I need a shirt that just meets expectations and walk around with that and see the comments you would get from people, because like, hey, I probably got that rating on performance. Like, how did that make you feel? Probably not great. We'll have to talk about how to make that one happen, because I like that's one of those things where it's like back during the pandemic when you're like, hey, listen, I know that you think your work's important, but you're not essential. You're not essential. And like, how does it feel to be told that the thing that you've dedicated a portion of your life you'll never get back to is like, not really essential, and meets expectations? Feels the same way to me. Like, oh gosh, let's kill someone's spirit one little bit at a time. So we talked about the importance of forward looking. What are the other key elements or signals or approaches that we should be thinking about to do this better? You talked about shortening that feedback loop. I think that's a great call out there. What other things should someone be thinking about weaving in? Because we generally all know what bad looks like. We've got some sense of that, but what does good look like, and what can we be doing to march in that direction?
Yeah. The answer which I'm going to share is not my own answer. I'm making this off an HR leader, and I love this, and this is with her permission. But essentially, performance reviews are not a time of surprises. Performance reviews are for confirmations, right? And good looks like that. Like, good looks like I've got enough feedback throughout the year, and this is where my manager comes and says that, hey, Sharthuk, you probably know what I'm going to say, but I'm just going to confirm that, hey, these are the things that we discussed. And that makes sense. You cannot surprise me at the end of the year. And also, one of the hallmarks of a good performance process is that you get help when you need it, which also means that managers and leaders, they can identify which people need help.
Mm-hmm. So this is not just about the performance piece and seeing that as happening.
Let's say around. Sorry. Go ahead, Ben.
It's okay. I was gonna follow up on that a little bit about the getting help piece, because I think that's surfacing who needs help, being able to step in and help them. This is not just a punitive process where we say, hey, listen, I want to list all the things you did wrong. but this is an opportunity for us to enable you with whatever we can, whether it's training, whether it's resources, whether it's connecting with a mentor, something to help you elevate your performance. I think it's a great way to position that as well, that it's not just to catch you doing something wrong, but to find ways to help you do something right.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point that you mentioned, that a lot of times people take away from the performance process that two things. One, it leads to a compensation increase, and I'm just going to ignore everything else, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
What's
And
the
the
number?
Yes. What's the number? And the second one is it's a punitive process, because one outcome is, of course, performance improvement plans and PIPs, and that's a separate story altogether. But you really hit the nail on the head. It's not just a punitive process. In fact, I would argue 90% of it is not punitive. It shouldn't be punitive. It should be enabling employees and helping employees in real time. And yeah, I would harp on that thing that, and for that, you need to be able to understand which employees need help. Not only that, who responds to what sort of help, right? And that's very, very important to know, because by help, I also mean motivation. Because if I learn the best by doing things. I get motivated by XYZ, but my brother, who still shares like 50% of my genes, he's an entirely different person, right? And imagine how that mix would be when you have completely different people. So yeah, understanding who needs help and helping them in the right way possible, that's, I think, one of the best signs of a good performance process.
As you were saying that, my brain immediately goes to, you're talking about this shorter feedback loops, really checking in on a regular basis. And it almost becomes this way to prevent poor performance over like being or punishing poor performance, where I can catch, hey, listen, I saw this thing the other day. I want to catch you up on this. Here's the best way to do that. Or here's a way you can do that better next time, versus it being that look back period. Hey, I saw you this 12 times in the last year. Every time you did it wrong. And all you can think is, why did you not tell me what's wrong with this relationship? So you talked about no surprises, using this as a source to get help, actually planning for the outcomes we want, better performance for people, not just a checkbox activity. All these good insights here. I'm taking some good notes, and hopefully the audience is too, because these are some great ways to think through and filter through how you see performance at your organization. So I want to give you a chance to close this up here. One last call to action, one last takeaway, or I don't care if you double down on something you've shared or if you share something that hasn't come up yet, but what would you give the audience as their sort of call to action here at the end to make sure they're doing the right things when it comes to measuring and supporting the performance of the workforce?
Yeah, I think the only thing which I would press upon you and the people who are listening, if you were to do one thing today, one change to your performance management process, because let's face it, it is a complicated process. It takes a lot to instill change in people and all of that. But the one change I would emphasize is equip your managers to give great feedback frequently. And if your managers understand that, you are hitting a couple of birds with one stone. And because if you're equipping your managers with the insights, and if they understand that they need to give feedback frequently, people are getting real-time help. It's no longer a punitive process. So you're defining the what's in it for me for managers, for people, and you create a feedback, not only a feedback loop, but what I call a virtuous loop of performance, where since you're giving feedback, performance actually improves. As managers, you get to see how the goals are actually improving day on day. And I mean, managers are also accountable to senior managers and so on and so forth, right? So it's in your best interest to give feedback. So as HR, if you can impress upon people that, hey, this small change is going to make everybody's lives easier, I think that's the biggest thing you could do today.
Tremendous. Yeah, that I keyed in on when you said what's in it for me early on the employee side of that and why they should be buying into this. But the manager piece of it is so critical, as you just highlighted. We'll have to have a part 2 at some point, come back to the what's in it for me for managers in this performance process and how to make sure they see this isn't just more busy work, but this is helping them elevate the performance of their team. So it elevates their performance as well. So such a great set of call outs there. If someone wants to learn more about CLAR and the great work that you and the team are doing to help enable this kind of high quality performance conversation and support for workforces across the country, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we'd love if people visit our website. I think that's a treasure trove of information which we carefully curate over there. That's CLAR, klaarhq.com. So KLAARHQ.com. A little bit of a doozy, but it's pretty simple to find. And I'm very active on LinkedIn myself. My name is Sharthok Chakraborty. I'll probably put it up in the chat, or you can share. So those are the two ways.
Excellent. Tremendous. I'll make sure and share both of those links in the chat so everyone can reach out, connect with you, Sharthok, and also see what the team at Claar, what you're up to, how you're helping to do this, because I think it's such a great set of call outs today. Good ideas around this. And as I said, I've yet to talk to an HR leader that didn't say we could do this a little bit better when it comes to performance and helping to enable that for our people. So thank you for joining us, for the support of Summer School, and for the good work you're doing in the HR community as well. To everyone else out there, stay tuned for more Summer School coming right up. When he said, I'm at my Starbucks name is Steve, that got me so good. Even hearing it again, it got me so good. George, I want to take this moment to just tell you, you are meeting expectations, by the way.
Thank you.
You're just meeting them.
I appreciate that.
Don't you feel invigorated?
It makes me feel like there's a transaction about to happen, and there's nothing transformational in this leadership situation.
Goodness.
I think sometimes you always say, it's not what you say to me, it's how you say it. And I think sometimes the delivery of things is so important. One of the comments was talking about, opportunities. Instead of using meeting expectations, not meeting expectations, and I really love that one there that you
From Pam.
From Pam. So shout out to Pam Stafford. She shared that performance ratings, they use opportunities to do better, all good, and crushing it. Instead of saying, hey, you meet expectations, somewhat meet expectations, you're doing it over and over. It's sometimes the language we use is so key. And I always say keep it simple, right? And say it in such a way that a 10-year-old, always think about the youngest child. And so how can the youngest child understand exactly what we're saying? And that's so important to me. But out of that conversational, the chat was talking a lot about the transaction versus transformational leadership. And I think that's so key, how we need to transition our minds from what can I get from people to what can we give to people to make them better? Because a better and healthy culture, better and healthy leadership is a better healthy culture. A better healthy culture is higher performance.
I wanted one more. Like you just kept going. Like, high performance is more money. Like the bigger budget. There we go.
High performance means people want to stay, and if people want to stay, that means retention is low. You don't have to go seeking for people, and then you become a great place to work. And we know that when people have a great place to work, they're 5 times more likely to tell other people about that because they have a sense of belonging.
Look at George using data.
You get 2.
Oh my goodness, that's impressive. That's impressive. All right, so our last session today, we have Sarah Reynolds. Sarah's been working with our team, helping out behind the scenes, doing some work with us at Lighthouse. So grateful, so thankful. Actually stepped in for me for the Unleashed conference we're talking about. I was not there for a session, stepped in, crushed it. We'll use that one. Crushed it and took care of things there, doing great work. So Sarah's background, Sarah's been here with us before for summer school, and the background there is around marketing. Like, what does a marketer have to tell HR? Well, apparently a lot. So we're going to get into some of the parallels there and some of the things that we can learn to be better marketers of what we're doing, what we're communicating, we're sharing. Maybe all of us can't be as charismatic and savvy as George, but we can get a little better on that. So we'll dive in with Sarah and hear about some good ideas on how to use those tips, suggestions. We'll wrap up after that with giveaways, you preview of day 3, all those good things. Here we go.
Yes.
I'm so glad to be here with all of you for another great session at Summer School. This is my favorite time of year, and I'm excited to be here with Sarah Reynolds. We've been doing some really fun stuff together, and so I'm excited to have Sarah here with us. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can use data to get to our theme this year, to move from reactive to proactive and really get to that. And data is a key part of that. Sarah's background as a marketing lead is a part of that. So Sarah, welcome. Goodness, I'm so excited you're here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. HR Summer School is one of my absolute favorite events of the year. I try and make it here either as a speaker or an attendee or both. I think every single year. I'm really, really excited to talk about maybe some of the synergies that I see between marketing and HR, my 2 favorite topics.
I didn't think about this till just now, but one of our very best sessions, like the one that people talked about, the one we're so engaged on in the last 2 years, one of the best ones was we had a CFO come in and say, listen, when I say this, here's what I really mean. And it was like the translation Rosetta Stone for how to talk to finance. And so maybe today we'll get some of that. That's not the focus of the conversation, but it'll probably come through as we're talking here. So anyone who's out there like, wish I could talk to our marketing team, our sales team, like Sarah may give you some insight on that too. So who knows? We'll get lots of good stuff. So before we get farther in the conversation, I kind of teed you up a little bit on some of who you are and what you do. Anything else you'd like to kick in there about who Sarah is?
Sure. So my name's Sarah. My pronouns are they and them. I am a recovering chief marketing officer. I've had marketing leadership roles primarily in the HR technology space for the last decade or so, probably as long as I've known Ben. So we'll both date ourselves a little bit here on the call. I am also a DEIB consultant, and I specialize in talking about things like pay equity, ethics in technology, which of course is a hot topic right now with the rise of AI, LGBTQIA plus workplace issues, and of course, how to just create genuine, inclusive, people first cultures. So I'm going to bring a little bit of the HR background, the DEI background, and also the marketing background, of course, to today's conversation to talk about how we can use data to tell a great story.
Excellent. So let's dive into this. So I've mentioned already, and the audience has heard this a couple of times here for the event, but our theme is moving from reactive to proactive. So much work that we do in HR and probably marketing too, right? It's just reacting to things, trying to put out fires. We've got to actually plan ahead, be more proactive, because if we do that, it will lead to less stress. It will lead to better outcomes, all those good things. So talk a little about what that looks like to be in marketing and be on that reactive side, maybe even the proactive side, if you can paint a little picture of both of those, because I think there's some good parallels we can draw as HR leaders from some of the same things our friends across the aisle face.
Yeah. So marketing, when it's in reactive mode, the CEO comes to you and says, I have this great idea. We should do X. Sometimes that's a really great idea because great ideas come from everywhere. And sometimes that's a really great opportunity to say yes, and let's do something different as a way of saying no politely. So I think that reactive, and it doesn't have to be the CEO, it can be the chief revenue officer, it could be a sales rep who has the best of intentions because they're trying to get into an account maybe that isn't like your typical buyer. They want help with messaging. There's always so many asks, right? And marketers who are in a reactive position, they're just firefighting. They're just catching those asks. They're trying to like do, a million things all at once. The best CMOs try and sit on top of that and say, let's not be reactive, let's be proactive. And it starts with telling a story. So the first tip I would give you is, whether you're a CMO or a chief HR officer or an HR leader, you want to think about, where am I now for my function or my company or my employee base, and where do I want to go? And depending on your role, that could be, where do I want to be a year from now? Where do I want to be 3 years from now? Where do I want to be 10 years from now? Some people in marketing land will talk about, I'm a challenger brand and I'm a very small company and I'm growing really quickly and I want to dominate the industry. And 5 years from now, I want to be a household name. The equivalent in HR is like, hey, I want in a year from now, our employees to be lifelong learners, to really understand that like acquiring new skills is a part of their role at work, especially with technology changing really fast. 3 years from now, I want my employee engagement to be X percentage points better, or I want my intent to stay to be X percentage points higher. I want my managers to go from being reactive to proactive, to really like lean into always coaching type methodologies, right? As opposed to like command and control, right? I want them to move into a totally new role. Dream big, but think about like what your story arc is, and then think about your role as shepherding your organization, your department, your tasks, your people, your whatever you focus on as like a part of that journey. Like, does this task or does this thing that someone's asking me for, does that get me somewhere on this journey? Is that part of my story to how I get to managers being great coaches? Or is that a distraction? And then that's a great opportunity to maybe go back and say like, hey, that doesn't align with the vision that we all agreed on at the start.
I was thinking, you said, I'm going to paraphrase, like, is it adding to that? Is it getting us that direction, or is it a distraction? I heard addition and distraction instead of addition and subtraction in my head, but is it adding to that? Is it getting us there, or is it subtracting? Is it taking away from that? Is it distracting us from that? One of the things I was thinking of as you were sharing there is you talked about casting that vision, the importance of saying, this is what it should look like, and this is where we need to be, and this is what it looks like. I was talking with one of our friends we met last week at a conference, and he was telling me about some change he's dreaming about, but he's not sure what to do with it yet. I said, listen, if you're going to share this, don't just share the headline, don't just share the facts of it, but say, here's what I'm seeing. And 3 months into the role, here's what I would be working on, and start casting that vision if you really want to do it, because they help someone else see what's already in your head. If you're talking, they may not see the same picture, but if you can cast that vision carefully, they'll get that same sort of connection there. I think that's so important. And one of the things you also did there, Sarah, is you talked about measuring. You said our percentage points should be this much higher, or our managers, this many should be connected, or people should feel like they're learning. And here's how we know that. We're seeing their uptake in content, as an example. Talk about measurement and data in this, because that feels like it may be like the secret weapon in getting this across, not just the vision piece, but then connect some data in to help make that happen. Would you agree?
Yeah, marketers love to measure stuff, or try to measure stuff to the best of our ability, right? And I think it's really important to be very intentional about the metrics and the measurement that you're thinking about. So when you start with your story, you obviously have this vision or this hypothesis about what you're going to be able to achieve. How are you going to measure where you are now and when you get there? And what are the like incremental points along the way that are going to tell you, hey, this is a leading indicator to say, yes, we're moving up the curve, or hey, no, it's off track and we need to pivot, right? Think from the outset about the measurement, and don't just think about like, what can we measure today, or how will we measure it, but also what could we measure, or what do we want to develop the ability to measure over time? Because maybe some of the things in your journey or your story is actually going to require you to develop a new way of measuring or thinking about measurement to be able to actually quantify where am I now and where am I going, right? But I think it's so important to have that baseline, because if you do all this great work and you don't have something to point back to say, hey, it used to look like that, you're going to be really challenged to tell a great story at the end about all that amazing stuff that you did. So I would think about what can you measure now? What maybe do you need to invent how to measure? I would also think about, how do you think about outcomes, right? So for example, Ben, you said if we're talking about learning, right? Content consumption, or the number of course hours that somebody takes, right? Average number per employee. That's a really great indicator, like a leading indicator that you're headed in the right direction. But what's the actual outcome that you're trying to measure, right? If I'm developing a culture of lifelong learning, it's not like for funsies, it's because that's going to be beneficial to my organization. Well, how is it going to be beneficial to your organization? Well, we're going to have more internal promotions. Okay, measure how many you have today and measure the outcome that you want in the future. Or, hey, we know that with technology changing really fast, we have a problem with change management. Well, how do I quantify the problem that I have today? And how do I quantify a better agility of my workforce in the future? Maybe that's the outcome that you're looking for. So try and ask yourself that like series of how questions or why questions, like what are you trying to do? And really, why are you trying to do it? To get to something that sounds like a business outcome, because that's going to make your story and your measurement a lot more powerful when you go to communicate it later.
I was going to, that last piece there, I was going to like double down on, is it makes it more, not just easier to communicate, but more credible, more connected. Like you're aligned to all those things that matter to everybody else. Because while that metric in my head may be great, like let's get them to take more content just as a start, someone else may care deeply about more safety or better customer service or something else. And I've got to start tying that, as you said, back to those other metrics, that actual outcomes that we can look for, because that's where you're going to get investment and support, not just saying people should be training more, taking more training. As you said, it's not for fun, right? It may be fun, but it's not for fun. It's for better performance, better outcomes, better results for the company, for that person. And that should roll up and be clear at some point across the board. So as we're thinking about these different pieces here, one of the things in the research that we're really looking at is how to break that inertia, that sort of sense of we've always done it that way. And we all know when you hear that, you're probably like me and your skin starts to like crawl when you hear someone say, man, that's how we've always done it. And that's their excuse for something terrible that should be completely destroyed and banned and shut down. And yet it's continuing on. So advice on that. How do we get past that? We've always done it. That's whether it's one of our leaders in the business is holding to that, or it's just a manager that's a diehard. I'm not going to quit doing it this way because I'm comfortable. I'm good with this. What suggestions, what ideas do you have for how to break that down, get past that inertia? Because that's where the real opportunity seems to lie.
Yeah. So in marketing, when we think about what's called messaging, like the actual words that we use to communicate with our customers, we often talk about identifying the pain point and making that pain feel very painful so that someone is motivated to change. Breaking inertia is always about finding a pain point, and it might not be the same pain point for every person that you communicate with. That's why knowing your audience is like so important, right? But understanding your audience's pain points, understanding like what drives their behavior to do the same old, and then helping to paint that picture of like, this is what it could be, a life without pain. This is for better or worse. This is a solution to your problem. And this is specifically the solution that I want you to partner with me on to try and get to. Sometimes those folks who are most vocal about like, it's always been this way, especially managers, those are a great case study for a pilot program, or those are a great like ally for you to create to say, hey, I know it's always been that way, but I know that, this part of your job is really painful. Why don't you partner with me on that part of your job that you're more comfortable with me sort of like poking at? Become a fan of me, my work, my team, all the great stuff that I can do. I can demonstrate my value to you, and then I can approach you about a solution that maybe puts that sort of like inertia to test. Like maybe now I can nudge you because you have a bit more trust. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, showing someone that you know them, we say, show me you know me in marketing, to identify that pain point, really understand what your customers are challenged with, really understand like what keeps them up at night. If you show somebody that you know them and you show them that you can make an impact, maybe even a small one in one part of their business, they're going to be more open to having a conversation with you about impact on that softer, squishy inner center thing that they're very maybe insecure about, or they're very tied to, that you're trying to move the needle on.
That's so encouraging to hear that. And I'm hoping people out there listening to this are taking notes. They're hearing you talk in marketing lingo, and hopefully they're translating this into some of the things they're seeing, they're feeling, they're experiencing every day in HR, because so many of those things you're talking about are very close parallels. You could be, if you hadn't told us you were in marketing, we would have assumed that you're talking about getting investment in an HR project, supporting wellness of your people, like any of those sorts of things, because they're both the same thing. They're both using the finite dollars the company has to try to make something happen, make a positive change. And I'm loving the story you're talking about, like trying to get the managers going there as the secret word for HR. I always tell them, like, the secret word to get anything done is pilot. That's always the answer, to try something out, especially if you have a resistant audience, because you get to try it with a smaller group. Once they see those results, everybody's like, hey, when's my turn? When's my turn? And then you get this excited audience that can't wait to test out what you're doing over there. But just taking it, trying to ram it down their throat. I mean, yeah, you might get that result for a short term, but you're gonna end up burning out any of that relationship capital you have and have a hard time next time you have to make a change. So I love that you're bringing those pieces to bear and really encouraging that. Should we use a fan, a supporter, like as our first one there for doing this, or should we go to one of those that's a little bit resistant, not the one that's like absolutely no, just a little bit resistant, to try to break that down and start weaving that together? Any thoughts on that?
I would say a fan or an ally is always going to help you, especially if they work a similar job to the person that you're trying to influence. And that's not always possible. But, for example, I'm a recovering chief marketing officer. If I need to influence the CEO, right, there's not a second CEO in most companies that I can go to and say like, hey, could you help me with your partner, right? But I could maybe get the chief revenue officer on board, or I could get the chief people officer on board, the CFO on board. That's a critical partner for both of our departments, right? I could get the head of product on board. I could get the head of technology on board. I could get the CIO on board. Again, another critical partner for both of our departments. So I would say find somebody who you have a good rapport with and say, hey, would you be my pilot? And then use that person to talk about the win and the success. In marketing, right, we love customer case studies. That's when I have a customer come and say, Sarah's product is great. Don't take their word for it. Take my word for it. I do the same job as you, right? You're looking for the exact same thing. You're just looking for an employee case study, right? Your employee or your manager is going to say, hey, this really worked for me. And they're going to be a powerful tool in going to the person who maybe is more of a skeptic or maybe needs a little bit of a nudge to be able to say, hey, it's not just HR or marketing telling a pretty story. it is actually something that really moved the needle for me. And I think that you should get on board with that. So I think that's a great approach, Ben, to kind of like figure out, where do you have an in, maybe where do you already have that relationship or that trust built up, or where do you have a fan in the organization who can help you convince the people who are maybe more skeptical?
I keep going back to, I heard experts recently in conflict of all things. And he said, listen, conflict isn't bad, because there's always some tension. We're trying to get something, and
We're human.
Yeah, they're human. And I said, there's a finite budget. None of us can have all of it. So there's a tension there automatically of how do we try to negotiate this? But it becomes about, how do we get on board for something that we're trying to accomplish together? Not, if I win, you lose, you win, I lose. It can't be that way, because that's very, very short-sighted and not going to lead to something you're excited about. So tremendous. Okay. Anything else we haven't touched on that you're like, here's my last secret sauce, best idea, anything else before we wrap up?
Well, it's summer school, and so it's ice cream season for most of us. I know you are a big fan of ice cream, and there's an old saying, like, you scream, I scream, we all scream for ice cream. There's also maybe a new saying, like, my job makes me want to scream. So I wanted to think about, I think about being memorable, right? Like, having a strong point of view makes you memorable, having something that people can take away and easily reference back to, right? When I do speaking, you're trying to keep so many thoughts in your head, you want to organize them, right? There's all sorts of like mnemonics and stuff like that people use to remember what they want to talk about. Well, I thought about the word scream, because whether you're coming from the ice cream position or you're coming from a challenging day at work, right? Sometimes you just want to scream. So I thought about the different things that maybe we could talk about in the word scream. Story, we already talked about. You want to know where you're going. You want to know how you can talk about the vision, right? And you want to make sure that you're clear about it, because as you said, data can tell a story for itself, but you don't want people to be confused about the story that you want to tell. You want to be really clear from the outset. So S for story, C for catchphrase or acronym, or a little something that's going to help people's memory hook on to your idea. I used to have a CEO who would always say, we're performing while transforming. And I can't tell you how many times I've said that myself, because it was really memorable and it really stuck with people, right? So have a catchphrase, have a tagline, have an acronym, have your scream, right? Repetition. So marketing is all about repetition. And sometimes as leaders, we feel like we're always saying the same thing over and over, but because you're saying it to multiple people, you're saying it to different audiences in the organization, you actually need to say it a lot more than you think, over and over and over again, until it's going to click and somebody's really going to get it. Similarly, when you are talking to a lot of different people, you want to make sure that you're clear on like an epiphany, like why does this matter? Why now? And that means that you have to really know your audience, which is the A. So your audience, like, how are you going to communicate to somebody you don't understand? How are you going to work on engaging a population of employees that you don't understand? How could you possibly achieve something or achieve a great outcome if you don't understand the folks that you're working with? So that's going to be your A. And then last, we talked about measurement and metrics all day long, right? But you want to remember that that's going to be the glue that really helps you tell a great data-driven story. So we're going to scream together here at HR Summer School as we come away from this session.
I unfortunately didn't hear anything you said after ice cream. I was so excited that I missed all the good. So I'll have to go back and re-listen to that part, because I was just enthralled. I was hoping for some cookie dough somewhere in here. So goodness. Okay, Sarah, this has been a ton of fun. I've gotten some good notes for myself already. I know the audience has as well. If someone wants to connect or follow you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to follow me is actually on LinkedIn. So you can find me at /Sarah Liz Reynolds. Or if you attend any of the industry conferences and you see Ben, I'm probably not far away. So please reach out to the Lighthouse team to say hi to me, or to say hi to the great folks here who run this awesome summer school program. I am so excited to be at this event.
Tremendous. Thank you again for sharing your insights, your expertise, and ice cream with all of us. And to everybody else out there, I hope you come away with this, with the hope, the encouragement that it's possible to overcome some of that inertia. As Sarah talked about, we can break down those barriers and we can be more proactive, have more impact, serve more people, and in a better way. Stay tuned for more Summer School coming right up. Yeah! Okay, there we go. Screaming together. Okay, so my big takeaways: scream. That was a good one. I heard that something about work is not just for fun, but it can be fun.
Yeah.
We talked about that a little bit. And then the very first thing that Sarah, you started off with saying, some leader brings you some idea that's a horrible, awful idea. And you're like, yes. And we could just do something completely different and not that at all. Like, just smile. Like, one of the things that one of my leaders, the best ones I respected, said, tell me how we can, not why we can't. So they may bring me an idea, but it's like, how can we make this happen? What is it going to take to make that reality? And it was not on me to list out all the excuses, the problems, the blockers, the challenges. You could spend all day doing that. It was get to how we can. And so that was some of my takeaways there.
I loved it all. Of course, Sarah is just phenomenal. She's top notch. The clarity of that, I think in the chat, again, is Ben, we don't really know what any of our speakers are going to say. We know that we have a few questions that we want to kind of pull some things that we've either saw them speak about or we know their heart, but we don't know these sessions and how they're going to play out because they're scheduled all over both of our calendars. But one thing I love every year, and we're seeing it in the first 2 days here, and we're seeing it today, especially with Nicole and Sarah, everything just seems to connect. The message, these sessions are flowing together. You got people saying glue plus scream equals ice cream. So, there's some greatness out of this. And so I'm just loving everything and seeing everybody in the chat that's just loving it as well. Keep the comments going. It helps us out and it blesses my heart to see y'all talking into this area as well. So.
All right. So we've got a couple of giveaways to do, I think, to wrap us up today. Is that right?
Yep. We got a ton. I decided since we skipped the middle session, we were trying to catch up on everything. We were about 25, 30 minutes behind, and we able to catch up about 15 minutes of it. So let's do more. But before we do more,
let's do a little bit of this. Okay. So let me get this shared up on screen so we have this and we can. There we go. Okay. So really quickly, just a reminder again, thank you to those of you. Some of you already have signed up for lunch breaks. Like, give it. I want it now. Great. All the good summer school stuff that you would expect. It's going to be right there. So great programming already coming for the rest of the year planned out. And we're excited about that one. Thank you to our partners who are already there. I've seen some of our friends from North Dakota in the chat and from elsewhere. So hey to all y'all. Glad you're with us. And
yeah, appreciate it. Also, special thank you to all our sponsors every year. We couldn't do this without y'all making this possible. So shout out to all our sponsors who sent promo gear. We got a lot of stuff that our inside people have. We got a ton of stuff that we're going to be mailing out to some of these phenomenal winners. I saw over the time we got a lot of goodies over here that we're going to be mailing out, books and everything. So appreciative of that as well.
All that good stuff. Okay, so you weren't kidding, by the way. You went a little overboard.
I was feeling cheerful in my giving, and so I wanted to give as much as I could.
And I feel like you probably did.
Yeah, so if your name is on the screen, right now. Shout out to you. We want you to join us. The top portion, the top 10 plus a bonus with Jennifer, because that comment just had me going. I really love what she shared. In July, you're going to be getting an email. So make sure you email at the bottom right corner. You'll see events@lhra.io. Make sure you send an email to all these. We'll send you a link to the AI course that was done by yours truly, Ben Eubanks. And then in July, we're actually going to have a live self-leadership masterclass. Both of these are valued at $99.99, and we're giving it to all of y'all for free. So make sure that you send the email and say either self-leadership class or AI. We'll make sure you get all the information you need for those courses.
Jill will take care of you. Just tell her you're on this list.
Shout out to Jill.
Yes.
She's been behind the scenes helping us.
Bless
when everything
you,
crashed
Jill.
down.
Yes.
We send her our love to
lots of you
Jill.
got an email from her, and hopefully you sent her back a smiley face because she probably needs it right now. Okay. And then more stuff.
More stuff.
More stuff.
We got swag boxes. We got Bengio books. I had to do that just to make you laugh.
You had to.
So we're going to be giving away some good books. Ben just wrote a new book on the payroll promise. Came out in March, and so we have that as well. Champion Your Purpose as well. So we'll be sending out that. Some swag box. We got all kind of goodies. Ben, I don't even know if you can reach those little big boxes, but we got all kind of stuff. ISAV boxes. There are some little things.
There's a whole ton
of goodies.
Of so maybe tomorrow we need to do like a quick passing some of the stuff across the camera so you know what's coming your way. So listen, the people here in person are seeing all this like hands-on. They're getting it. So man, incredible stuff. Okay. I think that's about it for our announcements, George, probably. Or any
Yep. These are the shoes. Else. Somebody asked for the shoes. These are the second pair.
Hold on. I'll get you back full screen. There you go,
ladies and gentlemen. Don't ask me what they are, but they're cool. Of course, they're those are the shoes for the afternoon.
Okay. There you go. And then was there a basketball around here?
Oh yeah, How many people from Oklahoma? If you're from Oklahoma, put the OKCs in the chat. If you're from Indiana, put the Indiana in the chat. But I'm born and raised. I lived in the South, but I'm born and raised in good old Indiana. So tonight, NBA Finals, Indiana Pacers. I don't go anywhere. We travel with the basketball because you never know if you're going to be able to stop. But tonight, game one. I love all OKC, but I'm rooting with my home team, Indiana Pacers, finals. Yeah, I'm nervous, to be honest.
You're nervous. We got through summer school, all the fun stuff that day 1, day 2 held, and now George is nervous about a game he's not playing in. So, I mean, there's that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow you don't have to be nervous because we're back with you for HR Summer School, day 3, last and final day for the year, which is so exciting and so sad at the same time. But we're going to be excited to have you back with us. We're going to have some incredible speakers, amazing sessions. We'll wrap up with another live session right here in these chairs for all of you to see us coming live from Huntsville. We're excited and grateful that all of you stuck with us today, not just through another wonderful day of it, but through some wacky technical stuff as well. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Until next time, always remember to champion your purpose. We love y'all. Pacers in 6.